we would now drive to California, to Adam's house, and find that because Adam now has your exact drum set, that he would now be playing exactly like you.
Really?
That seems to me to be that.
That's a fundamental truth, yep. A
You know
lot
what
of
I'm
people
saying?
think that the equipment answers so much when really the equipment is only an expression.
Yeah.
It's not an influence, it doesn't affect the way I play.
Yeah.
It's an expression of the way I play. You know, I tune my drums in such a way, I choose my equipment in such a way because of a vision I have inside, because of a goal I'm trying to achieve in expression. You know, that's what I think Bill Bruford dwelt quite strongly on, was the fact that it was supposed to be an expression of things. You know, it's not the essence of what kind of hammers and nails you use as a carpenter.
Yeah.
It's what your values that you apply to that, and the vision that you have in your head of what the perfect thing is that you want to build with those tools, you know. And I can't imagine that carpenters spend much time talking about different kinds of hammers and nails, you know, or doctors talking about scalpels.
What kind of stethoscope you got there?
Yeah, or auto mechanics talking about different wrenches, you know. I mean, that's got to be pretty limited. I have to think that when auto mechanics get together, they're more interested in the completed car, and they might talk about why they like a Ferrari better than a Maserati, or why they think a Rolls Royce is better than an Aston Martin, or whatever, you know. That's the kind of things they're going to talk about. They're not going to say why a snap-on wrench is better than, you know.
Craftsman.
Yeah. That's an essential analogy that I think really holds water, that you might get together and talk about music too. That's an important thing, that if I met one of those drummers, we might talk about reggae music, you know, which is something that I'm really interested in. I'm not interested in being a reggae drummer by any means, but it happens to be a rhythmic thing that I respond to strongly. And if I met another drummer, talk about what kind of snare stand is the strongest, or, you know.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. I've just come to understand that recently, because to me equipment was always very interesting. And I said earlier that I've always had an affinity for drums as a physical thing, you know, the combination of circles and lines. And there's something about that does appeal to me on a hard concrete level.
Right.
The way that drums look, the way they're made, you know. There is something about that that's good. And I've always been really interested in hardware, and I try to always be trying new things and be interested in new things in terms of equipment. And since we're trying to steer that way, this summer I've introduced an alternate drum set into my drum set, where but the Simmons not incorporated into my regular drums, because I didn't want to get rid of my traditional closed tom-toms, because to me they are a voice, you know. I can speak with those in a way that the Simmons do not speak. But at the same time, the Simmons have a certain power and a certain dynamic quality to them that I like, you know, and I liked it when I heard other people use it. But at the same time, I wasn't willing to compromise acoustic drums. So I hit on the idea of having two complete drum sets, where I could turn around and I have a little 18-inch bass drum back there, and another snare drum, and another ride cymbal, and the Simmons tom-toms, so that it doesn't interfere with my basic relationship with my instrument, which is acoustic drums, but it gives me a new avenue of expression, you know. And for certain kind of things, and I've come to realize that the limitations of the Simmons as far as expression, there's certain things that they can do and certain things they can't. So when I'm playing with that little drum set, for instance, I have to play necessarily in a different sort of way. And I can't play some of the kinds of patterns that I would normally do, because they don't work. You know, those drums will not speak in the same way that I can make a 9 by 13-inch double-headed tom-tom speak. You know I can get a whisper and a roar out of that drum, where Simmons, you can get a roar out of it.
Simmons won't respond to touch?
They have a sensitivity control, but all it means is that you can turn it down or up, so that if you hit it light, it'll make the sound. If you hit it hard, it'll make the sound, but still that sound. Whereas with a regular tom-tom, I know that if the harder I hit it, the more that head is going to stretch, and it's going to detune itself. And again, they have that in the Simmons, that they call it bend. But once you put that bend in there, it's in there, you know? Whereas with a tom-tom, it's such subtle gradations of physical input, you know, how much I put that stick into the head. And I can see the marks on my drum head sometimes, that literally 4 or 5 inches of drumstick are making contact with that head, because I'm hitting it so hard and stretching that head so much that the stick literally goes right into it. But that was the sound I was after, and it's the sound that the Simmons try to imitate, is that throaty quality of tuning the drum high and then hitting it hard so the head stretches and detunes, so you in effect get several notes at once. You get the initial high impact, and then it goes,
Right.
and of course that's the essence of the Simmons sound, is that,
Right.
and they call it bend, and you can tune that bend in, and you can tune sensitivity in, but at the same time you can't have it all at once. You know, with an acoustic drum, you have all that there, and in the same little fill I can do a triplet, and I can go,
Right.
and I have three separate notes there, three completely different voices, where the Simmons, of course, regardless of how you set it up, if you set it for whatever sensitivity, whatever degree of bend, it's that, you know, and if you do a little you still get, you know, you get three identical notes, basically, but that if you just
Because
can't
that
have
makes
that
it
overcompensate, and that
and
just
for me it's
makes
a
them make
positive
4 or
thing.
5
I
more
can
mistakes.
approach them
Knowing that already,
Yeah.
and I can tune them the way I would like them to sound, and I can play them with that limitation in mind, so I play a different way, and that's healthy too.
You ever thought of having the drums revolve so people could see it?
Next year they will, yeah.
They will?
Yeah, like I said, I just introduced that this summer.
Yeah.
I tried it experimentally, and I find that I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
I like the idea of having two completely different things, because again, the reverse drum set is a basic, a small bass drum, a snare drum.
Little 18-inch Tama bass drum
Yeah.
right there? Wow.
And I've always used 18-inch bass drums until I joined this band. I've always loved it.
Did you really?
Yeah, like the cannon-like sort of punch
Yeah.
that they have.
Great. Yeah.
An 18-inch bass drum to me is a very, very expressive instrument. And although for the greatest range of expression, for me, I found that a 24-inch bass drum has more voices. You know,
Yeah.
it can be literally, again, from a whisper to a roar and everything in between, where an 18-inch bass drum has one neat sound, you know, that I like. A nice sort of real strong gut punch.
Cuts.
Yeah,
Cuts, like,
that's it.
man, dig it.
So when I turn around, I have a single bass drum and a hi-hat and a snare, 4 tom-toms, and a few cymbals, you know. It's a very simple, basic drum set. And what people sometimes fail to realize about a large drum set like I use, or a lot of other drummers use, they tend to deride it thinking that it's all a bunch of sort of
Show.
reinforcements. It's something to make you look good. When actually, for any real drummer, your drumming always revolves around bass drum, snare, and hi-hat.
Right.
And your fills always revolve around 2 tom-toms and your snare.
Right.
You know, and anything else is just you take those patterns and you translate them to some little drums, or you translate them to some different voices, and it gives you something different out of the same old patterns, you know, the same rudiments of set drumming.
Yeah.
And that's basically the reason why I expanded on that, especially being a 3-piece band. The more voices I can have, the better, of whatever kind. But at the same time, I always understood the fact that all my drumming does revolve around a very small set of drums, you know, and the idea of being able to have that concise little set of drums behind me, excuse me, has proved invaluable even in rehearsals. You know, if we're going over a song again and again and again, instead of getting kind of tired of it and just cranking it out, I can turn around and play the other set, and it changes the whole thing about it and makes it fresh again, you know. And it's kind of been a revitalizing thing for me, so it's something that I think I will pursue further.
Well, what about the headphones?
Yeah, the headphones are basically for where we use program sequencers, or the sequencers, or rather the synthesizers that are driven by what they call arpeggiators, where you have it's basically triggered by a drum machine, where you put in a click track pulse, like, and then the arpeggiator picks that up and gives you that a song from Signals the Weapon is based around an arpeggiator, and consequently the ironic thing of it is usually drummers are used to a band that follows them.
Yeah.
You know, and if I tend to feel something that should be pulled back a bit, or something that should be anticipated a bit, or an accent that we should sit on top of, they follow me, you know. I do it, and they follow what I do. But of course, when you come to something that's as mathematical as a sequencer or an arpeggiator, there's no way they're going to follow you. You have to follow them.
Right.
So the ideal of that is I can use the headphones to give me that trigger. In the case of a sequencer, in a song like Vital Signs, or in the case of an arpeggiator in a song like The Weapon,
Right.
I have to hear that, you know. I have to follow it, basically. I have to swallow my pride and be a little bit subservient to the machine.
We can do Mike Wallace now. And yet, in 1980, Bill, didn't you say that you would never wear headphones?
Well, I know that quote. I don't remember saying that as such. I know I don't like headphones are not the same. You know, I have to use my imagination, obviously. But it's the essence of having an imagination. The fact that sometimes I've gone in and recorded a song all by myself. You know, a song YYZ from our Moving Pictures album. When we did the basic track, it was just me. I went in there and played the drum track, and then the other guys' parts were very difficult, so we figured it would make more sense if I recorded the track, and then they would have a chance to work on their parts without the pressure of all of us having to do it right at the same time. And so I had to go in there and have enough imagination to hear the song in my head, and to respond to all those dynamics and all those nuances just through imagination.
Yeah.
And the headphones are the same thing. I have to make an effort at it, yes, because with headphones on, drums do not sound like drums.
Right.
Period. You know, that's certainly a fact.
Yeah.
But the essence of it is that I know what they sound like, and I know that when I play a certain pattern, it has such and such an affect on people. You know, it has a certain excitement or a certain drama or whatever. I've been doing it long enough now that I know what those little key pivots are.
Yeah.
And when I have the headphones on, yes, I have to use my imagination. You know, it is for me, in a sense, it's a limitation.
Yeah.
That in order to follow those things effectively, I have to be able to hear them well, and the most sensible way to do that is through headphones. So it's just a thing I decided, well, it's not going to make me play worse, it's just going to make me have to work harder, because I'm going to have to think about it a lot, you know. I'm going to have to think, when I have those headphones on, I'm going to have to think about what I'm playing really sounds like. You know, I can't be lazy and just hear it. I have to think about it and imagine it. So, you know, it is a hard thing, but at the same time, it became a whole series of progressions that we had to make not to add another musician. We had to make use of every tool.
That's what I was going to ask you. If you
Yeah.
ever thought about doing that.
Well, certainly we have, of course. As a band that wants to keep improving and wants to keep changing our sound, we had to think about those kinds of things. But the interpersonal chemistry between the three of us happens to be such that we didn't want to tamper with that. You know, we didn't want to take a chance on adding another guy, because we get along well. We have a good balance of responsibilities. You know, and we like being a trio, basically, too. And I think that our audience likes us being a trio, and they are proud of the fact, as we are proud of the fact, of how much music we can create and how different we can sound all the time, being just three guys. So I think that it's something that we have to live with, is that we're going to have to make certain allowances for that, that we're going to have to use sequencers, and we're going to have to use all kinds of interfaced keyboards, and we're going to have Geddy and Alex rooted to certain things at certain times for them to be able to cover all those bases. And for me, anything that I can do to help that along is just icing, you know, it's the least I can do. And when it came to adding tuned percussion to my drum set, for instance, I'm by no means a classical percussionist, and I can't say that I have any kind of understanding of tuned percussion, but I can learn a part and I can play it, and it adds something to the overall texture of the band. And the same thing in the last few years with electronics. It's easy for me to say that, oh, well, I won't work with headphones on.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it contradicts the whole purpose of what we are as a band, you know. I can't take that kind of a hard line, and I have said before, too, that I don't like the idea of electronics as electronic drums, you know. I was a bit of a purist in a sense, saying that I like acoustic drums, I like the way they speak. But I found a way to incorporate that without compromising. You know, I didn't have to compromise playing acoustic drums. I didn't have to throw them away and replace them. I found a way to carry on those same values that I was speaking about, but also have the added voice of electronic drums. And that's the important thing. It's not a compromise that I faced. It's a balance. I found a way to have both. You know, it's like the old extreme of musicians wanting to be technical or wanting to be emotional, saying that only feel is important or only technique is important. Well, hell, they're both important, and not only that, but they're both good.
Right.
You know, I want to be technical, but I also want to be really instinctive and emotional. I want to play things that are exciting, and I also want to play things that are difficult, because I get a buzz and I get a satisfaction out of both of those. And the same with acoustic drums are my first love, and my first relationship with things is to hit them with a stick. And that still remains true, you know, and everything that I've said about electronics in the past is still true. But they don't replace acoustic drums, and they can never hope to, any more than electric piano replaces acoustic piano, or electric violin or electric guitar replace their acoustic counterparts.
Sure.
There's no question about that. You know, any person with a halfway open mind realizes that fact. But it's at the same time, it doesn't mean it has to be one or the other. You know, and that's a mistake I fell into for a while, figuring that you had to be either going towards electronics or be a purist and stay with things. And now I found a way to have both, where I can move forward into electronics but not have to sacrifice anything that I find important as a voice. You know, I don't have to give up my little toms, I don't have to give up my basic drum set. I just added something else, you know. So that's an essential truth that I think people tend to wander to extremes about it. You know, there's a lot of people have written saying, yeah, it's great that you don't want to have electronics. I'm the same way.
I'm
You know?
the same way.
Yeah, and I'm still true to that, just as I'm still true to the other thing about the headphones are a limitation. You know, they do change your perception of what you play, but it just makes me have to work harder mentally. It makes me have to imagine what this is going to sound like, and it's the same thing you have to do in the studio. I mean, obviously, anyone who's been in the studio knows that you have to wear headphones, and that's difficult. You know, I have to imagine a lot in the studio too, because I don't hear my cymbals right. I don't hear my snare drum right. I don't hear the inter-kit dynamics between snare, bass drum, tom-tom, cymbals. I mean, acoustically, all those things have an interrelation that's really subtle. About I can move from my snare to a certain tom-tom, and I'll know they have a certain relationship to each other. And I know that I can do this and come back. But I know I can't do, for instance, I can't go from my snare to my 8x12 tom and come back again. I know that doesn't work.
No?
I mean, acoustically, that doesn't work.
Huh.
But I know that I can go to my 9x13 tom and then come back to my snare, and that works. You know, it's just a matter of the subtle interdynamics of the way I tune things and the characteristics of a particular drum. Any given size, you know, has a certain voice about it, has a certain character to it. And I've come to know all those things from a long familiarity and night after night after night of hearing what they can do and will do. You know, and the drum solo, of course, is, I've talked about before, is my fundamental source of research and development as far as which voices will work together. So none of that has changed. You know, all I've done is added something else to that. So I still maintain those values, and it's still true that headphones change the shape of the way you perceive what you're playing. And electronics do not take the place of acoustic drums. You know, I still hold to all those principles, but at the same time I've found a way to be able to use headphones as a tool, as I've been able to use electronic drums as a tool, you know, without negating anything else.
Did you read the interview I did with Gary Chester? Okay. He wanted me to ask you, he uses in his teaching a bass drum pattern that you used, and I'm not even sure where it was from, but I called Gary and I told him I was coming here tonight. I said, is there anything you'd like me to ask Neil? He said, yeah. He said, ask Neil if in playing his bass drums, okay, he said, number one, ask him if he plays with the heel up, you know, okay, or flat-footed.
Right.
And if there's a difference in sound on the bass drums.
Okay. Yes. Heel up for the start. Yes,
you play heel up all the time? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because of the fact that it's kind of a physical thing in a way that because I have a lot of stuff, I like it all under me. Okay. I don't like things too far away. So consequently, my bass drums are very close to me, and even drummers that are smaller in stature than I am find it very uncomfortable that things are closed in too much. But I like to be able to have as much leverage as I need on any given drum. You know, I like to be able to put my weight in the right place, that I can put whatever degree of force I want over here, you know, over on my left side, over on my right side, regardless. I want all of my leverage there. So it's important to me to have everything in close. And consequently, my bass drum pedal is just about right under my knee. And I've noticed with drummers that sit further back and their legs are more extended, that they tend to play flat-footed, you know, because of that physical thing. And I've just found it very comfortable. And I use my ankle a lot. You know, it's not a question of playing from the thigh, although a lot of my pivoting does come from the hip. But anything fast obviously has to come from your ankle. I mean, same with your wrists. I play a lot with my arms, but when it comes to playing anything subtle or anything really quick, your wrists definitely have to do that, or your fingers, or some smaller muscles. You know, your long muscles can only take care of so much. So basically, I play with my toes, but I use my ankles. Where a lot of drummers that play just toes, all their pivoting comes from the hip. I use my ankle is pivoting in there as well. And the two bass drums are tuned the same, but because of the fact that my legs aren't the same, again because of the long muscles, you know, those are the easiest to get in shape, and for me they're the first to go out of shape. You know, I find towards the end of a tour I start to lose the tone of my long muscles.
Serious? Yeah.
In my legs, yeah. Whereas my arms and my wrists just continue to get better. Yeah. And it becomes easier and easier for me to play throughout a tour. But I find the long muscles are the most delicate. You know, I find they're the easiest to get back into shape when I start. But there's something very touchy about them where, for instance, when we used to open shows, I used to have a lot of problems with my foot because we'd only be playing 40 minutes a night. There'd be no warm-up, no sound check, and that would be the extent of my playing. Every day was only 40 minutes, which wasn't enough for those muscles, you know, and I used to have a lot of problems with my feet, with my leg muscles stiffening up and getting a kind of paralysis and feeling like they were working against me. And I've spoken to other drummers in the same circumstance where they would ask me, are you familiar with this problem? Or I would say to them, you know, have you noticed that as a phenomenon too? And it's definitely true that if you're not playing enough every day, those muscles suffer the most. It's really interesting. And consequently, that's the reason why the two bass drums tend to sound different, because, of course, my right leg gets a lot more exercise than my left one does.
Okay. But you think there's a difference, just in general, even if you have a single bass drum, between playing toe up or rather heel up or flat-footed?
It would have to depend on the player. You know, if you're used to sitting a good way back from your kit, which a lot of people are, and I can't believe that some people have 2 feet from them to their snare drum, and then another foot over to their bass drum, and their bass drum is so far away, you know, and I suppose you can get just as much power going there if it's that far away from you. The same with the snare. If it's out here, you've probably got to use your arm a lot more. But it probably does average out that you're getting as much impact into it. And it's got to be a very individual thing. You know, I find that I feel better if things are in close to me, and because I have a lot of drums again and cymbals and so on, I don't want them just there for no other purpose. I want them where they're usable. So I try to get everything in good and close and under me, basically. A good part of my drum kit is underneath me in terms of I have pretty long arms, so a lot of it can fall within the scope of being right under my center of gravity. That's an important thing for me, is to feel like I'm on top of the kit, where some people play behind their drums in a physical sense. You know, their kit is in front of them, whereas for me it's underneath me.
Shelly Manne.
Does he? No.
Man. He's a tall guy. He's like 6'2" or something. He sits. Everything is like extremely close.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the way I feel about it too. But I know lots of drummers that are very good. I mean, I don't think there's a qualitative difference there. It's just probably a matter of what you're used to or feel comfortable with. But there are people that are definitely behind their drums, and there are people that are on top of their drums. You know, it's probably just a thing that you get used to.
I want to ask you about the song "Losing It." Great tune, a little Hemingway.
Good. Yeah, not a lot of people have caught that.
And I also thought too, where I wondered if you might have saw it in a fearful way, that being you somewhere down the pipe. You know?
Of course, you have to say that, yes. But fortunately for me, as we covered a bit before, I have another set of goals. So that when I start to feel that I'm not improving anymore as a drummer, you know, not even getting worse, but just not improving anymore, I have another thing that I know I can go to work at and improve at least. If not necessarily get great at, but at least continue to improve and be fulfilled in that sense. But the two avenues that were explored in the song with the dancer was physical deterioration, and with the writer it was mental deterioration. And actually my original plan for that song was to carry it a little farther into the area of musicians. I wanted to cover like the idea of someone like Bob Marley, for instance, who loses it through a disease, through an internal thing that you have no control over, or with the case of a Keith Moon in a self-destructive sense. You know, when someone loses it, they don't really lose it, they throw it away. You know, and it's a bit too much to accomplish all in one song, but the concept of how I envisioned it all was all the different ways there are to lose something special. And then in the chorus, the essence was whether it's worse to lose something greater or whether it's worse never to have known it. You know, and to me there's a pathos I feel about people that have an unrealized dream of any kind. You know, when you talk to an older person who says, well, I always wanted to be such and such, but I never really gave it a shot, and that's sad. But to me it's not nearly as sad as someone who was great at something and has to watch it fade. You know, I've read enough biographies of different writers and different accomplished people in whatever field, and you get to sense the horrible tragedy of knowing that it's...
Could Hemingway not, he felt like he couldn't write towards the end of his life?
Oh, it was really a sad case with him that he was trying to respond to an invitation from President Kennedy. I think just before he died, he was invited to something to do with President Kennedy. He slaved for days just trying to write a little paragraph
Oh,
of
really? Yeah.
response to it. Yeah, it was.
I thought it was just because of he was lost the, you know, he was such a macho type
Yeah.
of guy that when he got older, and he was no longer this big physical, you know, guy that would go into.
It was probably all of that. It was, he would have to resent.
I didn't realize he couldn't write. Or
Not any specific disease other than the deterioration, I guess. It was the physical part of it too, because he was a very vital person, you know, and I can relate to that strongly because, like I said, I live life in a very physical sense too, non-competitive, you know, but I love physical expressions of things, you know. I just love a good workout of that sort. And when you get to the point where you can't do that, and where you've depended on your brain as an instrument, and all of a sudden it doesn't respond to you. John Steinbeck, I read a biography of him recently, and it was the same. He realized that he had lost it. You know, he knew that he couldn't do it anymore, and it was a source of tremendous sadness to him and frustration. And he never stopped trying either. And that's even more sad somehow, you know, to see somebody trying to do something that they know they can't do anymore. That was the essence of The Dancer too. That she
was that
still.
Somebody in particular, The Dancer?
Not specifically. It drew a bit from that film. What was the name of that? With Shirley MacLaine, and it was about the two.
I know which one.
The two ballet dancers, and one of them had continued on and was starting to be a bit of a has-been, and the other one had given it up to get married and raise a family. And they had been reunited later in life. What was the name of that?
We can find out.
Turning Point?
That's it. Yeah, The Turning Point.
Turning Point?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it was a bit inspired from that, but it was half the physical side of doing things as an athlete.
Yeah.
You know, there's a sadness to that. Geddy's a great baseball fan, and he's told me about pitchers, for instance, that all of a sudden just couldn't do it anymore, or a batter that's been beamed a couple of times, and all of a sudden, when he stands at the plate, his nerve melts.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind of tragedy.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to respond to that compassionately. It's a horrible thing. You spend all your life learning how to do a thing, and then for something beyond your control, all of a sudden you can't do it anymore. It's
The
very
goal
sad.
seems to be to be able to do something, or to keep coming up with creative.
I guess go on to something else. Have something else. But then there's still going to come a time when I can say, okay, when physically I can't do what I'm doing anymore, I have a mental goal that I can put my mind to work. But there's going to become a time when both of them fail you.
Yeah, but this guy's, look at Michelangelo or Da Vinci or those guys. You know.
Yeah. Oh, there's guys that wrote till they died, but still there's an essential dynamic to life that you have a prime.
Yeah.
And you have something leading up to that prime, and unfortunately you have to have something leading down from it, unless you're lucky enough to die young.
Yeah. No.
I guess, you know, like you can say about James Dean.
Yeah.
You know, he never had to go down.
Right. Yeah.
Because he became an incredible thing.
Yeah.
And then that was the end of it. Jimi Hendrix too. That's the thing about him.
Well, but Jimi Hendrix kind of towards the end.
Yeah, I can't. That's why I was thinking about Keith Moon. I can't use him as an example because he declined badly. He declined heavily before he died.
He was great.
Yeah.
You ever get to see him play?
Oh, many times.
Right. He was incredible.
Yeah, I saw them live so many times. That they were my band.
I steal a cigarette from you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Rub.
That's more over here.
Thank you. What are you smoking? Gun Hills?
Nope.
Canadian cigarettes?
Yep.
Great.
Players.
How do you feel about TV and the effect it's having on kids?
Mixed feelings, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it's really neat that MTV has become another avenue of kind of a way of exposure, I guess you'd say, for some bands.
Yeah.
I think it's been proven by a few different bands that wouldn't have gotten exposure on the radio, but their videos were interesting.
Yeah.
That people noticed them.
Yeah.
You know, so it's another avenue. I mean, it has the same flaws that radio has in terms of being too easy to program and too easy to try to find a formula for.
Yeah.
But I imagine there'll be competition sooner or later, and there'll be people that'll come out on a minority kind of thing.
I just wonder, like, well, seem to be a great reader, and it seemed to me that the thing that bothers me about MTV in particular is that when I listen to a song, you know, I like to put on the headphones or whatever, and just listen to it. and let my imagination soar. And yet I've noticed that when I see videotape, anytime I hear that song on the radio,
it's the basic flaw of what they thought video discs were going to take over the whole world. Music is enough all by itself.
Yeah.
You know, and anyone who loves music knows that already, that when you listen to something, you see pictures, and it puts images in your mind, and it makes you, regardless of whether it's abstract sort of designs that it makes you feel, or whether it's good images, that good lyrics or good music make you see something.
Yeah.
They make you visualize a whole cinematic thing, you know, and it's a way that we have written in the past from a cinematic point of view, where we have a theme in the lyrics, or sometimes even before the lyrics, we have something that we want to create, and we work at it cinematically, where we create a whole background for that, and then we put the center focus of action or character or whatever in the middle of it, and work at it just like making a movie. And there's no way that music needs anything else. You know, it doesn't really need a lyric sheet. And it certainly doesn't need a video to express it.
Yeah.
And it's two media mixing together, that's fine, you know, just like you can put poetry into a play, or you can put a novel into a song or whatever, but it doesn't take away from either of those. I mean, nothing's going to take the place of a good book, nothing's going to take the place of a good record, and nothing's going to take the place of a good movie. They are each separate unto themselves, and for me, I don't have a strong relation to video or film as a medium. I don't get any satisfaction out of making a video.
Yeah.
You know, I get a lot more satisfaction out of writing and recording.
Yeah.
You know, it's an essential thing, or playing a concert.
They had an interview, a whole story on MTV months ago in the New York Times Sunday magazine. I don't know if you saw that.
No.
Or not. And they were speaking to the guy, young guy, I guess, that started that. He's like 26 or 27. And he was saying that the concept for the videos that they do, they've discovered that the people that watch MTV cannot retain a plot. Okay? So consequently, when they do a video, all they're looking really to do is a few snippets and a few seconds of this image thing. And what I'm trying to say is, if they took a videotape and tried to say, okay, what is this guy trying to put across in a record? Let's follow the storyline for 3 minutes. That their demographics show that their audience would not be able to retain what they were trying to get across in 3 minutes.
Or they wouldn't hear the song.
Yeah.
You know, if the visuals were that good.
That blows my mind. That's,
and for me, I find very frustrating is, not only as a musician, but as a music fan, I really like to see people play their instruments, you know, and if you can't get to see them live, if you see them on TV, in the old context of seeing a band on TV, you'd see a band come on and play their song, or pretend to play their song at least, but they'd have their instruments there, and you could see how they look when they play that guitar, or how the drummer looks when he plays his drums, and it gives you a whole new insight into the nature of that band, which for a lot of modern videos, it becomes too obvious just to take a picture of the band playing their song, you know. And for us, when we've done interpretive kinds of videos where we want to take something beyond just us playing the song, we still maintain a balance of us playing the song, you know. The initial part of it is we'll film us playing the song, and then we might add some other images, and we might, like in the sense of the ones we did for Signals were countdown and subdivisions, or countdown. The choices are obvious. I mean, we were there and we want to express the fact that we were friends with people at NASA. We have access to these NASA films.
Do you?
And of course, we're going to use those. And with subdivisions, it reflects each of our upbringing. 3 of us all were brought up in the suburbs. And it reflects each of us as being a misfit and not quite fitting into the fabric of high school society. And we wanted to express that. But at the same time, both of those show us playing the song, you know, and then they'll cut away to the... like in subdivisions where we had a kid representing the misfit and his life and his parents and his school and that whole part of it. Yes, you know, that was part of the thrust of writing that song. So that's important, but it's not so important that it should override the fact that it is a song, a band is playing the song. You know? It's sometimes seems too facile to break things down to basics, but for me, you have to come down to the basic fact of what is it to be a musician. It is to play your instrument, you know. So therefore, when you're playing it on a stage in front of people, that is the essential reality of being a musician. If you're making a video, you're trying to portray a band who has written a song and who are playing that song. You know, that's to me the basic reality of it, and anything you do beyond that can be and should be just the icing or an extra bit of subtlety, and on stage too, where we use the screen behind us, where we have the projections and so on. Fine, it's not something that we're involved in though. The essence of us too is that we are there playing the song, and if we can do something else beyond that to increase the audience's enjoyment or increase their understanding or just add something else sensually, another sensual input to the show that doesn't take away from what we're doing, then that's wonderful. And that's why we're not into wearing costumes or putting on a theatrical performance, because we have enough to do with playing the song. But if we can do something in the sense of videos and that to add to it, then what can it possibly hurt? You know, it doesn't take away. It doesn't compromise anything.
It's like what was it? Joni Mitchell did a live album one time. I forget the name of it.
Miles of Miles? That one?
Yeah. You remember that part where she's in between tunes and people are yelling out, "Play Clouds" or "Do this or that"? She said something like, "How come nobody ever asked Van Gogh to paint Starry, Starry Night again?" That was, really perceptive. The musician, boom, he does the tune once and then, for years and years and years.
Yeah, well,
do it again.
That's right. Or the whole thing of what you owe the public too. Humphrey Bogart said that the only thing he owes the public is a good performance.
Yeah.
And essentially, if you break it down, you can say you can add all kinds of caveats and possible exceptions to all that, which we do respond to, of course, those exceptions. But when it comes down, fundamentally, what we are there for is to make the best record that we can make and to make the best concert that we can make. And if, obviously we don't always do that, but if we can do that, or at least even try to do that, that's our responsibility, and then I can never feel like if I don't stay around and sign autographs for people, if I don't want to pose for a picture with some guy's girlfriend, I don't feel like I'm not doing my function,
Yeah. Hey Neil, can I get a picture with my my girlfriend here? Yeah. Have you ever asked yourself the age-old question, why am I here?
Isn't that kind of a moving question, though? Every day that's a different thing, Why am I here? That's self-evident to me. I am here.
Yeah.
I am here, I don't know, I'm not too much into mysticism of any kind or religion at all, so I don't have to answer those metaphysical questions. I just take it as a biological, Darwinistic sort of cause and effect, that because all those other things happened, I happened to be born, and my parents begot me, and I was born, and I survived times when I might have died, and all that, and I don't have to ask, well, why was I spared? Why didn't I drown that time when I was caught out in the lake and somebody saved me?
You almost drowned one time?
Yeah.
Did you really?
So, you can ask those questions, but what's the point of it? The point is that I am here, and I'm making the best use of it. And, it's not so much that, but the fundamental questions become, why am I here this way?
Yeah.
I think there's a further qualification to that. It's not why am I here, but why am I here doing this?
Right.
Or why am I not doing that? That becomes a big question too.
Yeah.
I think the fundamental questions of life don't become that anymore. They're not the meaning of why I was born, because that's a simple biological fact. It's a question of why am I spending my life in this particular manner? And most times that tends to be a combination of circumstances and drive, I guess.
Yeah.
The fact that I wanted to be a successful drummer was by no means a guarantee that I was going to be.
Right.
But circumstances happened to rule my way that I turned out to be. And I don't think it's.
You think you prescribe to that, the Darwin theory of evolution?
For lack of a better one at the moment, yeah.
Oh no. Well, there's still another cigarette? Not bad. Jeez.
You just had one.
Here, just take a damn cigarette.
Are you a smoker?
No thanks.
I read an interesting theory.
It's interesting. I've done an interview for the last 3 nights, and every one of them didn't have any cigarettes.
This doesn't pay well at all, Neil.
Good way to get the cigarette.
I just said Neil play Canadian cigarettes. These are strong cigarettes.
You think so? They don't have all the chemicals and stuff that American ones have, though. And you'll notice they don't burn near as fast.
That's right. What's the name of this?
John Player Special.
John Player Special.
Yeah.
Like this. T. Bruce Whitted to send me down some of them babies. Yeah, I always thought, I prescribed the theory that I guess kind of a reincarnation type.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, I don't negate any of those things. You know, I'm not by any means closed-minded or cynical about it, but.
See this going in the magazine?
Yeah,
now?
real,
Yeah, right.
real good, Scott.
I take it. I'm from Missouri. You'll have to show me.
Well, no, I just did a lot of studying, but I thought it was interesting that suppose, just in theory, if that was true,
Mm-hmm.
and now this what was interesting about it, you know how a lot of times you'll see guys that are monster musicians, for example, at a young age, 5 or 4.
Yeah.
So how in the world, right? You know, I'm 20 years old and I'm just barely getting by. And I wonder if that, with that reincarnation, if we take experiences and we evolve with it.
I think genetically that's true.
Genetically,
You know, I see that I am the product of two sides of my parents. You know, my father is a very practical, organizational sort of man, and I think I got his sense. And my mother's a very spontaneous, very emotional kind of person. I think I got her sensibility.
Yeah.
And neither of them are what I am. You know,
Right.
My mother's that one thing, and my father's the other extreme. And that's probably what attracted them to each other.
Right.
But myself, as the product of them, I have both of those. You know,
Right.
and there's a history on my mother's side of romantic sort of adventurers in a tragic sense. You know, and
Really, yeah.
yeah, poets and warriors and you know the whole Welsh kind of thing, which my mother's side derives from. And on my father's side, it's more of the Teutonic or the Puritan Anglo-Saxon kind of values of hard work and organizational reason. You know, and so I have those two extremes of reason and emotion genetically passed on to me. You know, through my mother's side. So it's both sense and sensibility were passed on to me, and gave me a certain raw material, I guess, that neither of my parents had. You know, they had one thing or the other, but I was fortunate enough through their congruence to receive both.
What if we chose our parents in a set of circumstances as a lesson? You know.
It'd be too dangerous.
Why?
Because no one would ever decide. They say, "Oh, I want to." You know, if you think of most people you know, they say, "I want to have rich parents that live in London, England."
Yeah, but suppose you came from that and you had like a disastrous life or something because you weren't able to handle it.
Sure.
And you decided,
Mostly the case.
You know, like here and now, if we go through a situation, let's say we blow it, you know, and you think back, man, what I should have done was this.
Yeah.
Right. So suppose we did, you know, we got through our lives and we died, and we're just kind of reflecting in the spiritual world. And we said, okay, well, you know, I need to learn this and I need to learn this, so let me get back into this set of circumstances, which will give me the opportunity to learn what I messed up in the last.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting speculation, but unfortunately it's anti-human. You know, it's like saying if you could adjust yourself this way and attenuation and a little tweak here and there, it's electronic. You know, that's the kind of things that you can do with machines as tools. But as humanity, you can't really tweak yourself like that. You can't say, well, I want to turn up my emotional level a bit and turn down my reason today, and then tomorrow I'll be more rational and a little less emotional. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't think that's a set of choices that, as an organic being, that you have. You know, I think you have to make the best of the raw material that you're given in a genetic sense or in a reincarnation sense too, which I don't negate at all. But if you realize the fact that, for instance, there's a book called Messages from Michael. Are you familiar with that?
No.
But it's the theory of reincarnation being that each lifetime is a trial period, and you go through a certain cycle of a soul, and then your soul reaches a certain level, and it either passes the test or fails it. And then you go on to a next level, and there are old souls and young souls and medium souls.
Is that like from the Urantia book?
I'm not sure, but it ties in with what's the name of that? There's a weird word that was around in the 20s that encompassed it. I don't think I'll remember it, but there's a whole philosophy of that about the age of souls and the souls being a progressive kind of being that apart from life, and you're not aware of it when you're living, but they are constantly having to prove something and achieve something and become a medium soul, and then they become an old soul and all of that stuff, you know.
That would be interesting. it would sure change the perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I read those kind of books, and I'm
you?
interested in all of that. Sure.
Have you read Casey? Any of your Casey's books at all?
No.
I'll have to send you some up. Read them.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in mysticism from a romantic point of view, because like growing up in the suburbs, and again, what subdivisions is all about, that you always want something more exciting than the life you know. You know. So at the time, I thought, well, if I lived in Europe, it would be really romantic, and that's a wonderful far-off fairyland, which to me now seems tremendously naive, but I know that's the way I thought when I was a teenager, that the world that I lived in was only one of several possible worlds, and there was the world of being a person that lived in Los Angeles. That was like some kind of heroic, far-off, impossible ideal.